All right, I'd like to begin by saying good afternoon to everyone. It's delightful to see you all today.
首先跟大家问好问安，很高兴看到大家。
And we will begin this afternoon by reciting the Vajradhara lineage prayer. But I don't think we all have copies of it on our tables. So before we recite that, I'll just say a few words. We've had a very busy few days around here with the event this morning. I've had a very busy few weeks or a few months. And I have not had as much time to prepare for this as I would have liked. And our teaching has also been kind of shortened in time. We originally planned to be like a whole weekend, like a Friday night, 2 teachings on Saturday, 2 teachings on Sunday. But we have 3 sessions. So we'll see how this goes. It's probably good that we have 3 sessions if I've had less time to prepare. But I will try to do what I can to explain a little bit about Buddha nature.
首先呢，在授课之前呢，我们会唱诵大手印祈请文。那在这个还没开始唱诵之前呢，首先跟大家先说声抱歉，因为在这几周呢，这几个月当中呢，是非常的忙碌，所以呢，堪布也没有太多的时间来准备这一次的课程。那原来的课程的计划呢，是在礼拜5的晚上、礼拜6、礼拜天各2堂课。那现在就缩短为3节课。那堪布说他会尽他的所能呢，把这一次的课程浓缩，然后解说的简要一点。
So we will begin by reciting the Vajradhara lineage prayer, which is the first prayer in our booklet here.
接下来我们要开始唱诵大手印祈请文。
So I think it's page 6 if I remember correctly. Is that right?
应该是第6页。
Okay. 我多了这长真的罗那罗tam马巴米拉切这冈波巴du som she ja kunjen karma ba che ji chung ye ju ba zi nam tam zhi ta ca sun ba den ru ba so sablam ja ja che lang a nye bem nyame do gun da bo ga ju la so adep so ka ju la manam ju ba zi no nam tar jin ji lo shen lo gom ji kang bar som ba jin sen or ke na cha jen me pa dam sen bi de Choephel Chela Nyekor Shemba Mebar Jelo Mugur Gomji Govor Sombashin Mengater Gojebela Junda Soa Dembe Gomshena Jemin Mugu Jewar Jinjilo Yeng Me Gomjing Wajir Somatim Gajalodan Drava Majde Garjobe Gomchen Nam dong o chukur som bashin jiamayin jiryang charwala Mangarum Sharve Gomchela Korde Edme Domar Jinjilo Kewa Kundo Yangdalamatam Dalme Chugi Palalonjim Satang Lamji Yenderadzonim Dorje Changin Gompang Nyor Tojo Minji Jinji Buran Duzun Jingun Jingwani Razan Jingun Zima Balden Lama Dambala Jaza The Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so, to begin with, the first and most important thing is that we think about our motivation. Because we generally have good motivations when we come to teach or listen to the Dharma, but it's possible that we forget, or that our motivation gets a little bit tainted. So it's important for us to begin by trying to remember to have a good motivation, the motivation to help ourselves, to help other sentient beings, if possible to help ourselves achieve liberation, or to help ourselves and all sentient beings achieve liberation in the state of Buddhahood. So whichever level of motivation is appropriate for you. Of course, the higher motivations are generally better. But please listen with a good motivation to our teaching this afternoon.
首先开始聆听佛法之前呢，我们要升起一个清净的、正确的动机。那给予教法者呢，也是要升起这样一个清净的、正确的动机。那常常呢，在生活当中呢，我们常常会忘记升起这样一个正确的、清净的动机。那当我们在升起这样的一个动机的时候呢，我们主要的思维呢，是希望帮助一切的众生、一切的人类，以及一切的如母有情的众生呢，希望他们能够得到解脱。不止他们能够得到解脱，也包括我们自己也能够得到解脱，然后能够证得这个佛果。那能够达成更高的这个好的清净的动机呢，那是更好的。那首先呢，我们聆听者呢，要升起一个清净的动机来聆听佛法。
So the topic of our teachings for this weekend is Buddha nature. And I will be teaching according to or based on the first chapter of a text by Khenpo called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, or sometimes it's also translated differently in English as The Ornament of Precious for Liberation. In Chinese, I think it's just got one basic translation. But I'm using that as the basis, but I'm not going to go through every word, word by word. Nor do I see this as a way to start teaching that entire text for a couple of reasons.
首先，今天所要给予教法的主题呢，是佛的佛性。那主要呢，这个佛性我们是用于这个主要的这个经典呢，叫做《解脱庄严宝论》的第1章节。那可能有时候呢，有些人翻的这个经典的抬头呢，可能不一样。但是呢，我们是会基于用这个冈波巴的解脱庄严宝论，来开始教导大家怎么去发掘自己的这个佛性。
So actually the text, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, is a very important text for all of our Kagyu schools because it presents the basic practice, everything that we do. It's one of the earliest main treatises written by one of our great Kagyu forefathers. So it is a very important text for us to study.
解脱庄严宝论呢，这部经典呢，对于噶举派呢是极为重要的。那主要呢，这一部经典呢，是由这个我们主要的传承上师呢来所著作撰写的。
So basically, the jewel ornament teaches the stages that we have to go through to achieve, to go from beginning ordinary people like ourselves to going to reaching the state of Buddhahood. It teaches the basic things we need to know. Of course, knowing is not enough. We also have to practice, but it is a very good systematic presentation of what we need to do on the path. So it's not merely that the text was written by one of our Kagyu forefathers, it's also because it's a very important presentation of the whole path.
所以呢，这一部经典《解脱庄严宝论》呢，其实对于我们凡夫人来讲呢，其实我们不只要去知道它或是熟悉它，最主要的我们是要去修持这部经典所说的一切论述。那除此之外呢，这部经典是由这传承祖师所撰写的。所以呢，在我们学佛的道路上面呢，我们为这个经典为基础，才能到达这个佛果。
But I'm not planning to teach the entire text. I just want to talk about one chapter, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The main reason is that I have not actually had teachings on the whole jewel ornament of liberation. I've gotten to this point, and I still have not actually had a complete teaching on it. Because I've not had a complete teaching on the text, I don't feel comfortable teaching the whole thing. I can teach the parts that I have been taught, but I can't teach the parts that I have not taught. Even if I read it and it seems reasonable, it's better when you hear it from someone, hear it from a lama, and then teach what you've heard rather than just what you think based on what you're reading.
接下来是强调说，堪布他不会去教授整部经典，他只会挑一两个章节呢来解释这个解脱庄严法论，一开始最基础的这个课程。那主要呢透过由修持过的这些喇嘛呢，或者是这些行者呢，把他们经验来传授给我们，这样的方式呢，其实对我们是非常比较受益的。
So I will be teaching on the first chapter about Buddha nature, but I'm not going to teach, I'm going to use that as like a basis, and I will add a few other things. And I primarily wanted to speak about the topic of Buddha nature because it is a very important topic for us no matter what type of practice we're doing, especially when we're practicing Tibetan Buddhism.
再下来呢，我们会开始讲解第一章节佛性。那在讲解这个章节的时候呢，堪布还会再加一些他个人的见解以及他的思维。那不管我们佛弟子呢在修习什么样的法教呢，其实这部经典修习这部经典来说呢是极为重要的。
So pretty much everything we want to achieve in Buddhism, we can achieve because we have Buddha nature. Buddha nature means that our nature is the same as a Buddha's nature. There's no difference between the two. The natures are the same. The only difference is whether we know how to reveal or let our nature out. For us sentient beings, our Buddha nature is hidden. It's hidden by our afflictions, such as greed, hatred, and desire, ignorance. It's also hidden by our misunderstandings, in particular the idea of seeing ourselves and other things as being completely separate, the idea of dualism. So these things hide the Buddha nature, so we aren't able to see it. But it's still there.
首先呢，我们如何去发掘自己的这个佛性？那其实我们自己的佛性，自身的佛性呢，其实就跟佛陀的佛性其实是无二无别的。那如果要硬去解释说我们跟佛陀的自性跟我们自性是有如何的不同呢？是因为呢，我们是没有办法让我们自己的这个佛性显现出来，显现它的真实的如意。而显现出来。那对于我们这些众生来说呢，我们没有办法发掘或是显现自己的佛性，也是因为我们的三毒，贪嗔痴三毒所影响，而且也被我们的烦恼障所遮蔽。那因此呢，我们对于这个佛性呢有所误解，因此我们没有办法很清楚的去看清楚自己本身的佛性在哪里。
For instance, we and all beings have the capability to feel love, loving kindness, love for other sentient beings. We all have the capacity to want other beings to be happy. That capacity is present because we have Buddha nature. That's inherent in our Buddha nature. That's part of our nature.
所以每一个众生呢，皆有佛性。那拥有佛性的主要的其中一个特质呢，是什么呢？我们拥有能力去升起这样的一个慈悲心，对于一切的众生升起慈与悲。那这样的一个发心是很好的，这就是我们自己本身与生俱来的这样的一个佛性。
Also, we as sentient beings, when you learn about Buddhahood, you hear about achieving liberation or achieving the state of Buddhahood or so forth, and you might wonder, Is this possible? And the answer is yes, it's possible because our nature is the same as a Buddha's. If our nature were completely different from a Buddha's, it would be very difficult for us to achieve Buddhahood. But because our nature is exactly the same as a Buddha's, we can also achieve Buddhahood. That is because we have the Buddha nature that is the same.
所以，我们一般的凡夫俗子就觉得说，要成佛、要解脱是非常的困难的。那大家都会有这样的一个疑问。其实呢，每一个人呢自身呢都有佛性，所以要成佛呢是可能的。那如果不可能的话呢，对于我们凡夫俗子来讲呢，那是就是对我们来说就是非常的困难。那其实堪布所要解释的就是，我们就跟佛陀一样，都有自己的佛性。那其实要达成解脱以及得到佛果呢，其实是可能的。
Likewise, we start out the teaching thinking about having a good motivation, the motivation to benefit oneself, to achieve liberation, or the motivation of bodhicitta, of wanting to achieve Buddhahood and bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood. The reason why we can reasonably have a motivation like bodhicitta, that we want to bring ourselves and all sentient beings to Buddhahood, is because it's possible. If it were not possible, it wouldn't help us to have that motivation. But it is possible. And the reason it's possible is that we and all sentient beings have the potential of Buddhahood. That means we all have Buddha nature.
所以我们一开始呢，强调说，当我们升起一个正确的动机，然后升起这个无上的这个菩提心呢，主要呢都是帮助自己一切众生呢能够得到解脱，得到这个佛果。那一切众生都可以成佛。那我们主要强调的是，只要我们拥有一个清净的动机，升起菩提心，然后能够帮助一切的众生得到解脱，那一切的众生都有这个潜能、潜力，然后变成这个佛陀一样的这样的一个具德的这个条件。
For example, when the Buddha first developed the idea that he wanted to become a Buddha, he was a poor farmer, a very poor farmer. He wasn't any different than us. You might think I could never become a Buddha, but I think the Buddha at that time, or the being who would later become the Buddha, originally didn't think, oh, I can be like that. But he was very poor, and all he had to eat one day was a bowl of, sometimes they say soup, I think it might have been like some sort of a kanji or a gruel or something. Not very nice, not very good. If he had kanji, he didn't have any pickled vegetables to put in it. And he heard that there was a Buddha nearby, and he wanted to offer it to the Buddha, but he thought, oh, the Buddha will never come and take food from me. He doesn't want this thin gruel. He wants to go and get a nice meal at a rich person's house. But the Buddha knew. The Buddha knew what he was thinking, and so that Buddha went and stopped by this poor farmer's house, and the farmer was delighted. And he gave the Buddha his meal for the day. And he was delighted, the Buddha ate it and was very happy to have a meal that day, no matter what it was like, because for a Buddha, it really doesn't matter if the food is good or bad, it's all the same. It's all delicious, right? So, and because of that, this poor farmer decided, I want to become a Buddha, I want to become just like this Buddha.
那再下来呢，康布就举了一个例子，就是其实每一个人呢，不管你是什么样的身份，都可以成佛。那之前呢，在佛陀时代的时候，有一位呢非常贫穷的一个农夫，他自己本身呢也希望祈愿自己像佛陀一样，能够成就这个佛道。那有一天呢，佛陀有在经过他家的时候呢，这位农夫想要供这个粥给佛陀吃，那这位农夫呢，就心想就觉得说，佛陀应该是想要去比较富有的人家来去用斋。那当下呢，他也没有想什么，他心中升起的一个念，他希望他现在拥有的这个白粥呢，以他最亲近的这样的一个动机呢，希望能够供养这个佛陀。 那其实佛陀有他心通，他知道这位农夫在想什么。那佛陀呢就经过了他们的家，然后呢接受了他的这位农夫粥的这样的一个供养。然后呢，同时这位农夫呢心里也想说，当我在供养佛陀的当下，同时呢，我也祈愿能够跟佛陀一样，具有这样的一个佛性，能够跟佛陀一样，一天能够成就佛果。
So because he had the same nature, he could become a Buddha. It's like if you have water, H2O, we're going to have a science lesson today, or as much science lesson as I can. If you have water, H2O, it's liquid, right? But if you put it in the freezer, it'll turn into ice. And ice is still H2O. So the water can turn into ice because it is the same nature. But you cannot take that water and make it into an iPad. Because this is not H2O. This is much more stuff. There's more than just two hydrogen and one oxygen per molecule, right? Is that right? You guys who are in school probably know better than me. I've forgotten all my science.
所以呢，就我们自己本身的这个佛性呢，跟佛陀的佛性呢，其实是无二无别的。那堪布呢，用了一个非常的简单的例子来比喻这个佛性。那其实我们平常所喝的水呢，是化学的这个公式呢是 H2O。那这个水呢，我们知道本质呢，它是一个水。那当我们把这个水呢放在冰箱的时候呢，它就变成一个冰。那其实我们知道，这个冰呢是由水所组成的，所以水呢跟冰其实它的本质是一样的。那当然呢，我们不可能把这个水呢把它转换成一个 iPad， 所以因为它的粒子是不同的，所以堪布想要借由这样的一个例子呢，来跟大家阐述解释说，其实我们自己的佛性呢跟佛陀的佛性呢其实是无二无别的。
It's also when we do our practices, when we do our meditation practice, the reason that we can do the meditation practice, and that it's worthwhile to do the meditation practice, is because we have Buddha nature. For example, here at the monastery, we do green Tara practice every day. People do their own practices. You visualize yourself as the medicine Buddha or Chenrezig. We do these practices, and the reason why it's possible for us to do these practices, and it's beneficial for us to do the practices, is because we have the same nature as the Buddhas, Green Tara, Medicine Buddha, or Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig.
因此呢，当我们在做这个禅修的时候呢，对我们成就这个佛果呢，其实是非常重要的。在日常生活当中呢，寺院里面我们常常拥有绿度母的共修，有药师佛的共修，有四臂观音的共修。那其实呢，我们透过这样的一个禅修以及共修呢，能够帮助我们有很大的利益的。主要的原因是因为当我们在做观想的时候呢，我们主要的观想的方式是我们自己本身的自信，佛的这样的一个自信呢，其实跟药师佛、绿度母以及四臂观音的佛性其实是无二无别的。
So if, let's take Chenrezig as an example. If we are meditating on Chenrezig, and Chenrezig is the embodiment of all the compassion of the Buddhas. He's an expression of Buddha nature, appearing in the form of a Buddha. You know, the Kuan Yin Posat. So for Tibetans, he appears with 4 arms. In Chinese, she appears as Kuan Yin Posat. Same essence of compassion appearing in different ways. But we can imagine ourselves being Chenrezig and do the meditation, and through doing the meditation, we can also become just like Chenrezig. The reason for this is that we have that same Buddha nature that we can manifest by doing the practice. In other words, by doing the practice, we can clear away the obscurations that are hiding our Buddha nature, that are hiding our nature of compassion, so that it becomes greater and greater until it's finally the full-blown quality of a Buddha.
举例说明呢，当我们在做四臂观音的这个修持呢，以及禅修的时候呢，我们会观想这个四臂观音呢，它有4个手臂，然后 它有这个摩尼宝，然后有这个佛珠等等，在珍宝呢在身上。那其实呢，我们在做观修的时候呢，我们要观想这个四臂观音呢，它是一切慈悲的这个总集，也是一切诸佛菩萨的总集。那当我们在做观修的时候呢，我们自己本身就要观想，我们就像是像四臂观音一样，这样的一个充满一个慈悲的这样的一个的心境。然后呢，希望有透过这样的观修呢，我们能够划线，以及呢发掘我们真正的这个佛性、自信在透过这个观修来表现出来、展现出来。那有透过这样的一个修持呢，我们才能够净除我们一切的所知障以及烦恼障。那透过这样的修持方式呢，我们才能把我们的佛性以及我们的慈悲更容易的展现出来。
So pretty much basically everything I've said up to now is stuff that I have read elsewhere or that I've heard Trungpa Rinpoche say, or both. But now, as I was thinking about this yesterday, I remembered an article that I'd read. So I have to make up something a little bit here, but I'm going to preface it saying that this is an unbased assertion.
所以刚刚所解释的呢，也是堪布自己透过聆听choephel仁波切的这个法教，以及呢透过这个经典书籍里面他的这些感受，那希望透过这样的一个感受呢，能够把这个佛性自信的这一个部分，能够让大家更容易的浅显易懂。
So there was an American philosopher named Thomas Nagel, who wrote an article, very well known among philosophers, which means not many people know about it. A few people know about it. An article called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?"
再下来呢，堪布要解释有一位美国的很有名的哲学家，他的名字叫做 Thomas Nagel。那他有一篇文章呢，叫做What is it like to be a bat？ 就像如果我们是一只蝙蝠，会是怎么一个样子？
So what he writes in this article is that we as humans have absolutely no way of really knowing what it's like to be a bat. I mean, we could put on a bat costume, we could flap our arms and hang ourselves from the ceiling, but we would just be humans pretending to be a bat. We would not actually be a bat. So we would not know what it is like to be a bat.
所以呢，这篇文章主要是在讲说，当我们一位人类呢，就是我们没有办法去感受一只蝙蝠它的感觉或是它的感受是什么，那我们只能去假装我们自己是一只蝙蝠，然后呢，可能把我们自己的双手展开，然后假装自己倒立在这个就是天花板上，然后感觉自己是一只蝙蝠，但是我们自己本身身为人类没有办法真正的去感受到一只蝙蝠它的样子或者它的感受跟它的知觉是什么。
So what Thomas Nagel is proving in the article, or is trying to prove in the article, is that we have a subjective consciousness. There's a feeling of what it is like to know something. So, but it's limited because for us humans, we can't understand what a bat thinks like. We cannot think what great white sharks think like that. We can't understand what mosquitoes think because they're completely different than us. We even have a little bit of trouble understanding what it's like to be other people.
所以呢，这篇文章呢，就是也是主要是讲说，我们自己有这个自我的这个觉知，去了解某一些事情。那身为人类的我们没有办法去知道或是感受，可能鲨鱼啦，或者是蚊子啦，他们自己的感知是什么。那同样的同理呢，我们也不知道，我们有时候也很难了解我们对方在想什么。
But it's very different when you're meditating on a deity. When you're really meditating. I mean, if you are sitting there, I should be visualizing myself as like having forearms and white in color. I'm not this color. Why am I doing this? You're kind of missing the point of the meditation. The point of the meditation is to see yourself in a pure form so you can understand what the nature of your being, the nature of your mind is. And so it's, you do these meditations, you recite the mantras, you do the visualizations as you're instructed, in order to really know what your actual nature is. And when you know what your nature is, you find that it is exactly the same as the Buddha Chenrezig, exactly the same as the Buddha Shakyamuni. This is why we can do the meditations, and why it's useful for us to do the meditations. It's useless for us to try to pretend to be a bat unless you want to make people laugh. Right? But if you meditate on being Buddha, if you meditate on being Chenrezig, then there is a point to it, there is a reason. And it's possible for us to gain a result out of doing it because we're visualizing ourselves being who we really are rather than who we think we are.
所以呢，当我们在做禅修的时候呢，我们不是只有去专注于，就像说四臂观音它本身的这样一个形象，它是四臂观音，然后它穿戴什么样的珍宝。那其实我们主要禅修的目的呢，是透过了这样一个唱诵，或者是在禅修，或者是在观想的时候呢，我们是要透过这样的一个禅修的方式，就是说透过这样的一个观想，为什么我们要观想四臂观音？也是因为四臂观音菩萨呢，他本身拥有这样的一个佛性。当我们在做禅修的时候呢，我们是要学习去像四臂观音菩萨一样，去发掘自己本身的这样的一个佛性以及自信。然后，如果我们只是像一样画葫芦的时候呢，就要模仿四臂观音，他四只手臂，他穿戴的珍宝，这样的话就会蛮可笑的。因此呢，当我们在做禅修的时候呢，我们是要观想这个四臂观音自己本身的慈悲，然后他的这个像佛一样的这个觉性，这样的话，我们才能在学佛的道路上面才有所进步。
The knowing that we have Buddha nature is also the basis of all the practices that we do, such as Mahamudra, which Trungpa Rinpoche often taught, and he taught here. It is the basis of the Dzogchen practices. These are essentially the same, although the techniques are different. They're both practices where you're looking at the nature of your mind. The nature of your mind is just another word for saying your Buddha nature.
对于这个修持这个佛性来讲呢，我们可以透过大手印或是左牵的这个法教呢，来修持这个佛性。
So, when we say everyone has Buddha nature, it seems at first like it's kind of easy. Oh yeah, we all have Buddha nature, right? This seems kind of easy, but actually then you start thinking about it, it starts getting more and more difficult the more you think about it.
所以我们知道每个人都皆有佛性，那其实表面是看起来好像很简单的去发掘自己的佛性，但是后来仔细的去深入的去想一想，好像要发掘自己的佛性，好像是越来越难。
The first big problem is, if I have Buddha nature, why am I not a Buddha?
所以一开始呢，我们会想说，如果我有佛性，那我为什么不是佛？
So how can we have Buddha nature, and how can there be Buddha nature? That's the pure nature of a Buddha. It's not stained. I mean, when you think about what a Buddha is just completely pure, pure love and compassion, indescribable wisdom. You can't identify what a Buddha is or isn't. It's this pure nature of love. And so what are we? I mean, it's hard to, we might have love for a few people, but it's not very pure often, and we have a lot of greed and desire and hatred, and we get annoyed at things and so forth. So we are certainly not Buddha. So how is it that we can have this pure nature?
所以我们要如何去获得这样的一个佛性呢？那其实我们在想说，我们如何要像这个佛陀一样呢，或者是佛菩萨一样，拥有这样一个非常亲近的慈心以及悲心，而且拥有像佛陀一样具备这样的一个殊胜这样的一个智慧。 那我们会想说，我们如何呢能够断除我们一切的这些贪嗔痴三毒呢？然后能够获得这样的一个佛性。
So we have the Buddha nature, it's pure and it's not affected by stains, but as long as there are all the stains of our greed, hatred, and misconceptions, we don't become Buddha. So that's the first point that's difficult.
首先呢，为什么我们没有办法获得这样一个清净的佛性？也就是因为我们有这个贪嗔痴三毒这个染污，把这个我们的佛性所遮蔽住了。
Now the other difficult thing is that all the stains in our beings, they're not new. We've had them in this entire lifetime, and they've come from previous lifetimes too. In fact, our beings have always been stained since beginningless time. Otherwise, we'd already be Buddhas. If we weren't stained, we'd be Buddhas. But since we aren't Buddhas, we know that those stains go back, and all of those stains have causes which were prior to them. So you can't find a time when it started to be stained. It always has been stained. And yet we're saying that you can remove the stains and become a Buddha. This is really kind of difficult to understand.
再下来，我们刚才所说的这个三毒这个染污呢，其实它并不是一个新的东西，因为在我们无始劫以来，或者是过去、现在、未来呢，我们都有这个染污在。那我们无始劫以来所造的这些恶业呢，造就了我们这些三毒及染污。那我们要如何去把这个三毒染污呢，把它移除掉，其实是非常的困难的。
And the third point that's really difficult is that because we have the nature of a Buddha, we also have the nature of all the qualities of the Buddha. We have the nature of the love of the Buddha, the compassion of the Buddha. We still have all that quality. We have the nature of the wisdom of a Buddha inside of ourselves someplace, but it's just hidden by the stains. And it doesn't come out on its own. We have to actually train in doing virtuous actions, giving up bad actions, practicing virtuous actions with our body and speech, doing meditation, developing our loving kindness, and so forth. And unless we do that, the qualities that are in our Buddha nature will not come out. So it seems like you have to do something to make the qualities. So how can they be inherent within you?
所以呢，每一位众生呢，都皆有这个佛性。那在我们每一个人的身上呢，其实都有这个慈与悲的这样的一个特质。那我们自己本身的佛性也具有这个很大的这个智慧。那我们没有办法去发掘它们，也就是因为这些染污把它遮蔽住了。那这些染污呢，其实它不是自己生长出来的，是由我们自己凡夫俗子呢，造就了一些恶业，让这些染污屏蔽了我们自己本身的这个佛性。那如果我们本身呢，如果能够少做一些恶业，然后多做善业，那透过禅修的方式呢，我们才能够让自己的佛性呢，能够慢慢的展现出来。
So that's the basic situation with Buddha nature. We have Buddha nature. It's been present but it is stained. The stains have gone back from beginningless time. We need to reveal it by practicing meditation and virtuous actions. And this is all kind of difficult to square to reconcile with the Buddha nature itself being an unstained nature of a Buddha within ourselves.
所以我们刚刚也解释过了，佛性本身呢，它是被我们自己的染污所遮蔽了。那这些染污是由无始劫以来我们自己所造作的这些恶业所产生的。那我们如何呢，能够让我们自己的这个佛性能够再次的展现放光出来呢？也只有透过这个禅修以及持续造作这个善业，才能够让我们的佛性再次的展现出来。
So at this point, I think it's good for us to kind of step back a little bit instead of not talk specifically about Buddha nature for a few minutes, but talk about our general situation, the general situation of ourselves here in samsara. Because we have samsara. We read and we hear teachers and we read about nirvana. We hear about these two things, and it seems like pretty much everything we experience is samsara. But there's also nirvana that we want to achieve. So this is basically everything can be included in these two, samsara and nirvana.
所以呢，刚刚我们有解释了这个佛性的这样的一个概念。那我们的佛性是如何被遮住，或者是说我们如何去发掘我们这个佛性？那在主要的这些内容呢，就是我们希望透过发掘我们自己的佛性呢，才能够从这个轮回当中能够解脱。那除了解释到轮回当中呢，我们也会讲到这个涅槃的部分。
So when we look at them, if we look at samsara first, what is the characteristic of samsara? Well, the characteristic of samsara is that it is emptiness. When you look for what samsara is, it's really hard to find anything to say, that is samsara, because something else is. There's no real thing. It's like it's said in the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Form is not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than form. The appearances of samsara look to us like they are real, solid, enduring things that are going to either make us happy or cause us harm. And yet when you examine them, you can't find exactly what it is that would either cause you harm or benefit you.
接下来我们是要先讲解这个轮回。那轮回当中呢，它本身的这个特质其实是一个空性的东西。那其实我们会指这个那个，其实在生活当中呢，其实没有这个或那个，它其实是一个空性的东西。在心经来说呢，色即是空，空即是色，也就是在讲解这个空性的这个部分。那对我们来说呢，有时候我们会透过我们自己的感官呢，眼睛会看到说，哦，这个东西是真的，这个东西呢是坚硬的。那有时候我们也看到任何东西是欢喜的，或者是这个东西是痛苦的，会受到伤害的。那如果我们用心呢，仔细去观察、去判定，其实这个东西其实是不存在的，它是空的。
So the nature of samsara is emptiness, but the way it appears to us is actually out of confusion. Confusion here means that we kind of mistake what it is. Like confusion means a mistake. We think it is something other than what it is. Like we have this bouquet of flowers, right? It looks to us like a bouquet of flowers, and we think it's real, that it's something that's, a real bouquet of flowers. Is this a real bouquet of flowers? Yes. Well, what is it? I mean, actually, if you look at it, it's actually just colors and things and everything that's put together. And if I take one flower out, is it going to be a bouquet? It's still a bouquet. How many flowers do I have to take out? And if I take all the flowers out, is it still a bouquet? It's not. So there's nothing real that's a bouquet there. And even with the flowers, their petals fall off of them, and they can fall apart too. So there's nothing real about them. But we see it as being something real, and we think, that's a nice bouquet. Now, a bouquet is a small example, and it doesn't make such a big difference to us. But when we see things that we think are really going to make us happy, like money, or when we see things that we think are going to cause us harm, like people who seem aggressive or so forth, we hold on to these. We have ideas of these as being real, and because of that, we experience a lot of suffering.
所以轮回的本质呢是空性的。那有时候也是因为我们的感知、我们的观念的问题呢，我们常常会对于这个实质的物质的这样的一个观念会有所误解。那譬如呢，刚刚堪布呢拿了就是一束花，当我们看这一束花的时候呢，我们看它是真实的。但是呢，堪布说，如果我们仔细的去观察，那其实这束花呢是由很多小枝花所组成，那它有不一样的颜色。那如果呢，我们慢慢的把 这一盆花从一根一根的把它就是花朵呢把它移除掉，那最后呢它就变成是空的。那以我们的眼睛来看，它还是花吗？它不是，因为我们把这个花朵、花瓣都把它移除掉了，所以它就变成一个空的东西。那在日常生活当中呢，我们常常呢就会执着于金钱，有时候呢我们执着于我们所喜爱的人，或者是任何人伤害到我们。那因为由于我们自己感知、我们执着的关系呢，造成了我们自己本身产生了很多的烦恼，让我们自己受到很多不一样的这个痛苦以及伤害。
So the nature of samsara, I think I said characteristic a few moments ago, that wasn't correct. It's the nature of samsara is that it's empty, the appearance is confusion, and then the characteristic is that it's suffering, because everything in samsara becomes suffering, becomes painful in some respect. The good things in samsara turn into painful things. Even things that seem neutral, there is just a little background suffering to it. So the nature of the characteristic of samsara is that it is suffering.
轮回的这个本质呢，它本身呢是空的。那其实我们所看到的这些眼前的一些这个现象呢，其实都是像幻境一般。那轮回的这本质呢，也是痛苦一切的来源。那当我们了解这些特质呢，我们就能够更清楚这个空性是什么。
Now, nirvana, the nature of nirvana is exactly the same as the nature of samsara. It is also emptiness. In that, when you look at samsara, so you look at a Buddha, it's hard to find any specific thing that is a Buddha or that is nirvana. You can't pinpoint anything. It's beyond our conception. So the nature of nirvana is the same in being emptiness. It is not different in nature than samsara. The difference is in how it appears to us. Samsara appears as confusion, but nirvana appears as the complete absence, the dissolution of all confusion.
再下来要解释涅槃。那涅槃呢，也是一样的，跟轮回一样的这个本质也是空性的。那其实呢，我们仔细的去观察以及去思维，其实佛陀呢本身，它也是一个是空性的，是空的东西。那没有一个特定的这样一个佛或者是一个涅槃这样的一个东西本质，它其实是不在的。那如果说是要说真的存在呢，是因为我们自己的感知以及认知的问题，才会觉得它真实的存在。那其实它的本质呢是不存在的，是空性的。那主要呢，我们来讲是说这个轮回呢，它是造成我们一切的这个混淆。那涅槃来说呢，它是混淆之中的这个解散、驱散的一个部分。
And so nirvana is empty. The nature of nirvana is emptiness. The appearance of it is the absence of all confusion. And the characteristic is that it is complete and utter liberation from any suffering, any pain. All of our pain comes from our confusion. And so when you no longer have any confusion, you are freed of all pain. So that is the characteristic of nirvana.
对于涅槃本质来讲呢，它是空性的，但是因为我们的感知的问题呢，我们会造成了很多不一样的痛苦。但是当我们认知一切的这些东西是空性的，那我们就会从这个痛苦当中得到解脱。
So we're confused, right? And it's not just us, it's actually all of the sentient beings in samsara, all the sentient beings of the realms who are confused and in samsara. Only when we achieve the state of enlightenment, in particular the state of Buddhahood, are we completely free of confusion and therefore completely free of samsara. So what makes us confused, or what are we confusing? When you're confused about something, right? So what we are confused about is emptiness. We are mistaking emptiness and thinking it is real things, a real me, real other people, and we think that we're independent. And we think that we're lasting, enduring, and we think that we can be helped and harmed, and so we get attached to things, we like things, or we feel aversion for things and want to push them away, and this creates a cycle of suffering.
再下来就是我们一切众生呢，因为非常的困惑，因此呢，我们没有办法从这个解脱当中呢，从轮回当中得到解脱。那当我们只要认清一切的这个一切的本质是空性的话，那我们就可以从这个痛苦当中得到解脱。那我们知道说，因为我们感知的关系，我们在这个轮回当中呢，我们不知道什么是真的，什么是假的。那我们要开始去深思一下，什么样的东西困惑着我们？那其实呢，只要我们认清的空性的一切的本质，那我们就能够从这个痛苦当中呢，能够得到解脱，然后也能够从这个轮回当中也能够得到解脱。
Now, the main reason why we are confused is because we have ignorance. Actually, confusion really is just ignorance. Ignorance here means not recognizing our own nature, not recognizing the emptiness that is our own nature, or the Buddha nature, that is the natures of our mind. Because of that, we have confusion, and we take things that are actually empty and then see them as being all the different objects of all of samsara, all of the objects of our lives. We see the way that we perceive them because of our ignorance. We see them as being real things, real independent things that are different from us. And the reason we see them in that way is because of our ignorance.
那我们为什么没有办法证得这样的一个空性呢？主要的原因是因为我们自己的心事呢是非常的混淆的。那这个混淆的是从哪里出来的呢？主要是我们的无知。那无知呢，这样的一个这个特质呢，没有办法让我们认知到我们真正的这个佛性。那也因为这个样子，我们没有办法去辨知一切的一切的事物。那当我们拥有这个无知的时候呢，我们就会很执着于一切有相的这些东西。但当我们没有办法摆脱这个无知的这个条件或是特质的时候呢，我们也就没有办法证得自己的佛性。
So these appearances we experience them, but they're actually more like experiences in dreams. They're dreams like dreams or illusions that are put together by causes and conditions. There's nothing real or enduring about them if you actually look at them. But they appear to us as if they were. Like when you are in a dream and you see something in a dream, it seems really real to you in that dream until you wake up. Like if you're having a nightmare, you see some horrible thing in your dream, or you dream that you're drowning. You can feel in your dream the water going into your lungs, and you can feel that you can't breathe until you wake up. It's the same. We're in this dream of samsara, that we need to wake up from that to see that we're not, we need to wake up from it and free ourselves from the confusion.
就像是说，我们需要去感受它，或是经验，透过这样的经验呢，如何才能从这个轮回当中能够觉醒？那就像我说，我们在做梦的时候呢，我们会感觉仿佛看到一切的东西都是真实的。那当我们在做梦的时候呢，我们会看见，这应该是真的，或者是说，我们会发现我们拥有一个噩梦。然后我们就溺水了，我们没有办法呼吸，我们发现水呢都进到我们的胸腔里面，然后我觉得我们快要濒临死亡一般。但是当我们拥有这个噩梦的时候呢，我们可能会吓醒。当我们吓醒的时候呢，我们就知道这 刚才所做的这一切的梦呢，都是假的，都是空的。所以，我们如何从这个轮回当中这个洪流当中能够觉醒呢？也就是要透过正确的这个觉知，然后透过这样的一个认清这个空性呢，我们才能够从这个解脱当中轮回当中得到解脱。
So we have this confusion that causes us to have experiences of samsara, which means that we experience pain. And this has been going on since beginningless time. But this confusion, we can wake up from the confusion when we achieve complete and perfect enlightenment. And so we can wake up from that, but it's not going to happen on its own. We have to do something about it. It's like when you're having a dream and you're asleep, the sleep is going to end at some point and you're going to wake up. But when we're in samsara, experiencing the dreams and illusions of samsara, you wake up from one dream and you find yourself in another dream. And so if we want to wake up from all of the dreaming, all of the illusory appearances of samsara totally, we have to achieve Buddhahood.
就是因为我们自己心的这样的不稳定以及非常的混乱，因此呢，我们没有办法从这个轮回当中得到解脱。那这些痛苦呢，也就是因为我们无始劫以来所造作的这样的一个恶业，所以我们在今世当中呢，才会感受这样不一样的这样的痛苦。那我们如何呢，才能够让我们自己觉醒，不受这样的痛苦呢？只有透过得到解脱，然后得到佛果，才能够从这个轮回当中的洪流当中能够得到解脱。那我们知道说，如果我们不做什么事情的话呢，我们是没有办法得到解脱的。因此呢，康布就举了一个例子，就是说，当我们在做梦的时候，做噩梦的时候呢，我们会在梦境当中又做了一个噩梦。那这样的一个就是这样的一个轮回当中呢，我们没有办法从这个噩梦当中里面觉醒，因此呢，只有透过修持呢，得到这个成就，得到这个佛果，我们才能够得到解脱。
So we are in samsara, we are experiencing suffering. If you haven't seen much suffering in your life yet, you will see more. You can also look at the suffering of other people. As our parents grow older, our grandparents grow older, you can see the pain and suffering that they experience. And if we grow old ourselves, this is the same thing that's going to wait for us. It's going to happen. There's a lot of suffering, and it will last for this lifetime and future lifetimes. It's gone on for all our past lifetimes too. And we aren't going to get out, it's not going to end on its own. But we can do something about it. We can make efforts to achieve enlightenment. And so the question then becomes, well, what do we need to make those efforts?
所以我们知道说，轮回当中有非常多的这样一个痛苦。那同时呢，有时候我们会看到我们自己的爷爷或者曾祖父、亲人呢，他们慢慢的变老，然后呢，他们也是承受了不一样的这样一个痛苦。那这种痛苦呢，不只是他们一切的众生呢，在过去、未来、现在、未来呢，也是持续的在痛苦当中。那他自己本身是不会去自己去结束的。因此呢，我们要尝试的努力去让我们自己得到这个佛果，得到证悟。那我们再下来，我们需要做什么呢，才能够得到证悟呢？
So, in order to achieve Buddhahood, well, you have to have the proper basis. You have to have basis here. It means like to be the right kind of being, which generally means to be human. So fortunately, we are all human. So we've all got the good basis, and that's the body. And the second thing that you have to have is that you have to have a bit of faith. The more faith you have, the better. But you have to have faith. You have to have a human body, and you have to have faith. And the fact that you all have shown up this afternoon on a lovely day when there could be millions of other things to do, the fact that you are actually here shows that you have some degree of faith. So that's excellent. So you have the human body and you have faith.
所以再下来呢，我们如何才能够 就是从这个轮回当中得到解脱呢，也主要的方式就是就是得到成就正得佛果。那这是最基本的。那其实对我们来说呢，我们其实是非常的幸运的。那第一个呢，我们拥有一个暇满的这个人生，有一个很好的这个人生宝。那第二个呢，我们拥有了这个强烈的这个信心。当我们拥有这个信心的时候呢，我们在修持的时候呢，也能够更进一步。那今天是一个风和日丽的一个下午，那其实我们大家呢都有可以做不一样的事情，但是大家因为选择来这边聆听教法，表示对于这个佛法法教呢有一定的程度的信心。
So we have the basis. Now, but the basis alone isn't enough. So you need something to get you going, and that is what traditionally in the texts it calls the condition, but sometimes it just occurred to me now that it seems like a good word would be a catalyst, something to get you going. And what that is the teacher. So like as His Holiness the Karmapa spoke about this morning, we need to have the teacher in order to be able to progress along the path. Because we have the basis, but we don't know what to do. We need to have someone reliable who can give us instructions and say, this is what you need to do to follow the path. If you don't have someone teaching you what to do, you might, who knows what will happen to you.
所以我们刚刚在成佛的道路上之前呢，我们刚才有讲了，第一个我们有暇满的人生宝，第二个呢我们有这个强烈的这个信心。那拥有这个基础呢其实是不够的，我们需要这个好的这个条件。譬如呢今早大宝法王有讲，我们在学佛的道路上面，我们需要有一个根本上师或者是善知识来引导我们。在学佛的道路上面来指引我们，因此呢，我们需要一个具德的这个善知识，然后来帮助我们成就这个佛果。
Now, as the Karmapa said this morning, there are good teachers, there are actual teachers, and then there are, not so good teachers. There are fake teachers. Like a really extreme example of this is the story of Angulimala. Do you know, I'm sorry, I'm just bringing this up to, do you know Angulimala? He was the one who is at the time of the Buddha. He had this Brahmin teacher who got jealous of him. He was really intelligent, very, very intelligent. And the Brahmin teacher thought this guy's going to know things better than me. This isn't any good. I have to ruin him somehow. So he said to him, before I give you any teachings, you have to go back and you have to come back to me with 1,000 fingers of people that you have killed. And so you have to go out and kill 1,000 people. Now Angulimala, because he had some habits from past lives, and so when he heard this, he was like, yes. And he went out and he killed 999 people. And he cut off their fingers, and he put them in a necklace around his neck. It must have gone around a few times. 1,000 fingers, each finger is pretty thick. There's a lot of fingers around his neck. 999. And so he was going to go, he needed one more person, but everyone in the area knew about him, and so they all ran away. The only person who wouldn't run, there were only two people who wouldn't run away. One of them was his mother. Because, she still loved him. What are you doing, son? So he was about to kill his mother when the Buddha came by. And he thought, I don't have to kill my mother. I'm going to kill him instead. And he ran after the Buddha, running after the Buddha. And the Buddha's just rocking along quietly, very serenely, like a Buddha should walk, right? Just one step in front of the other, very mindful. And Angulimala is running as fast as he can, but no matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who was just strolling very peacefully. Finally, he got totally exhausted. And then the Buddha taught him, and he became an arhat. So that's enough of that about that story. But so someone like Angulimala, the point is that he had a bad teacher at first who said, kill 1,000 people. And then that didn't do him any good. In fact, if he had not met the Buddha, he would have probably been reborn in the hells for, thousands of lifetimes, more than an incredible period of time. But because he saw the Buddha, and the Buddha knew how to teach him, he was able to become an arhat, to be freed of all his afflictions and suffering. So this is why we need a good teacher. Now, I can't say that I'm going to be able to teach like that, but
所以今早呢，大宝法王有解释我们如何去寻找这个好的这个善知识，以及不好的善知识。那刚刚堪布呢就举了一个例子，就是比较是极端的例子。那在佛陀的弘法的这个期间呢，有一位这个行者呢，他叫乌格里马拉，这位行者呢，那他呢遇到了一位非常就是极为嗔心以及那个嫉妒心极为高的这位老师。那这位老师呢会觉得说，我不能让这个弟子超越我，然后我一定要想办法呢，就是来毁坏以及让这个弟子做一些就让他做一些恶业，那不能让他比我更好。那时候当下呢，这位老师呢就跟这位弟子讲说，你要去杀了1000人，但等你杀了1000人之后呢，我才能教你这个佛法。那当下呢，这位阿古拉玛这个学生呢，他就去杀了就是999位的这个学生，999位的人。那后来呢，他就只差了1位。那他那时候回来的时候呢，他就在路途当中呢，他在他的身体上面呢，他就挂了很多人的这个手指啦，然后挂在他的胸前啦。那时候呢，他还在寻找就最后一位。那最后一位呢，他遇到了两个人。第一个呢是他的妈妈然后他也不可能，因为他还爱着他的妈妈，所以他不会去亲手杀了他的妈妈。那第二位呢，他就是看到了这个佛陀，那佛陀刚好出现，那他就慢慢的跟着这个佛陀。那佛陀当然他有很大的这个神通力，那佛陀也当然不会受伤。那当下呢，佛陀就用他的这个佛法之力呢，度化了这位学生。那当下这位学生呢，就成了阿罗汉，让他从这个轮回当中得到解脱。那因此呢，堪布在这边是要强调，遇到这个善知识呢是非常重要的，在我们在学佛的道路上面，能够帮我们得到证悟，能够得到解脱。
So that's the basis, is that we have a human body and faith. The condition or catalyst is that we have a good teachers. And then the method, you also need a method. You have to know how to make it, right? So if you don't have the method, you can't achieve enlightenment. So the method is the instructions the gurus give us.
接下来呢，我们有基础的条件，也就是说，我们遇到的这个善知识其实是极为重要的。那拥有了善知识呢之外，我们也不能忽略这个方法。那上师或者善知识给我们的这个方法呢，也就是他给我们殊胜的法教。那这个当我们在接受这个法教的时候呢，我们才能够成就佛道。
But you can have all of those, and if there's no actual cause, nothing that can be turned into Buddha or make Buddhahood, then there's no achieving Buddhahood. For example, if you are making bread, you can have water, you can have the support, you can have a bowl to make it in, you can have the yeast that will make it rise, you can have an oven to bake it in, you can know how to bake bread, you can have someone who's taught you how to bake bread. But if you don't have any flour, you will not have any bread. So similar, you have to have a cause to achieve Buddhahood. And for us to achieve Buddhahood, we do have the cause. That cause is Buddha nature.
所以呢，当我们要成就这个佛果的时候呢，这个果，那我们需要有具足的这个因缘的因。那比如说明呢，当我们要吃一个面包的时候呢，这个面包是如何组成的？首先呢，它需要有水，它需要有这个那个就是不一样的这个物质呢，像可能从这个米里面萃取出来这些物质啦，或者是说我们如何用这个烤箱去来烤面包。那如果 我们缺少了像这个粉。这个面粉呢来做这个面包，那如果我们缺少这个面粉，我们就没有办法做成一个完整的面包。那我们就用这样的一个方式呢来举例，就是当我们没有这个面粉的时候呢，没有这个好的因缘，我们就没有办法成就这个佛果。因此呢，拥有具足就是拥有这个完整条件的这个因呢，这个条件我们才能够达成我们所要的这个佛果。
Now, when we talk about Buddha nature as a cause, it's important to remember that it's different than other sorts of causes. For example, if you have a seed that grows into a flower, that seed transforms, it changes. You have the seed, and then the seed no longer, by the time you have a flower, there is no seed there. And the flower is different than a seed. A flower has a nice scent. A seed does not, generally. Some seeds do have some scent, but they're different scent than the flowers, right? So the seed, by the time that there's a flower, there's no more seed. But Buddha nature is different because it's exactly the same right now as sentient beings and in the future when we achieve Buddhahood. It will not change at all. So it's exactly the same. It's like if one of the analogies, and we'll speak about some of these analogies more tomorrow, but it's like if you have gold ore, a gold that is hidden in lots of other rock. That gold is still gold when it's hidden. When it is revealed, it is still gold. Its being gold does not change. It is exactly the same. Chemically, it is still the same. I don't remember where it is on the chart of periodic table of elements, but it's still the same element on the chart. It does not change in nature. Similarly, our nature does not change from now until we achieve Buddhahood. Instead, it's a case of being able to reveal and recognize what our own nature actually is.
所以呢，拥有这个成佛的拥有这个佛性的这个因呢，其实也是非常重要的。那堪布用了一个例子来讲说，当我们有了种子，然后把种子放在土里面，那这个种子呢之后会变成这个花。那但是如果我没有放在种子这个因在这个土壤里面呢，当然也不会有这个花这个果。那每一个种子呢，种子一开始大部分是没有任何的香味的，但是当我们把种子放在土壤里面，然后呢，就花会绽放，然后就会有香味。那堪布呢，也就是解释，佛性来说呢，其实它是不一样的。佛性的这个本质呢，它永远就是佛性，它不会因为外在的关系，然后来让这个佛性变得质。那佛性呢，它的本质永远都是一样的，始终如一的。那堪布也用了一个方式来举例，就是说，一块金呢，就是被一大堆的这个石头把它藏起来，那金子也不会因为被这个很多石子呢把它隐藏起来，它就不是金子了。金子本身的本质还是金子，就是金块这个本身。所以堪布用这样的一个比喻呢，来比喻说佛性本质呢，它是不会变的。
So I think in terms of the material to cover this weekend, this is a good point to stop. But just one thing in terms of it, understanding that we have Buddha nature, knowing that we have Buddha nature, is kind of simple intellectually. But it's hard to really believe. And if we really want to believe it, you have to find some sort of method to believe it. And that's actually to do the Dharma practices. When you do the Dharma practice, for example, if you start out and you do a little bit of meditation, and you find that you can be calm and you can rest with your mind. That's like showing it's like a little bit of the glow from the Buddha nature coming through. When you do a deity meditation, when you feel like you're having a real experience in your meditation, that is like a sign of your Buddha nature coming out. When you are able to feel real compassion, selfless compassion for other sentient beings. You hear about other sentient beings and their situation, you think about it, and you just feel terrible compassion for them. That is a sign of your Buddha nature. So a large part of what we need to do when we think about Buddha nature is we need to kind of look for the signs of it in our lifetime and realize sometimes you just feel love or compassion or you feel peace that doesn't come from anything. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just kind of there. That is like an expression of your Buddha nature.
所以有时候我们会觉得说，得到或是开启我们这个佛性呢，其实是非常困难的。那有时候我们会很难相信，会这么简单吗？其实只要我们找对这个方便法，其实对我们来说，其实是有可能性的。那对于我们修行者来说呢，我们要找对修持的方式，能够帮助我们佛性能够慢慢的展现出来。那比如说明呢，我们可以透过这个禅修，让我们自己处于一个非常的平静的状态，然后每天慢慢的来修持，我们就可以看到我们的佛性慢慢的这个曙光会慢慢的出现。那如果我们持续的每天的这样子的去做修持的话，相信这个佛性的这个特征以及征兆也会慢慢的展现出来。那当我们这个佛性慢慢展现出来的时候呢，我们会对于一切的众生都会展现出无私的这样的一个慈悲，以及慈悲的这样的一个菩提心这样的一个关怀。那当我们在做修持的时候呢，我们主要的目的是要透过这样的一个修持的慈心以及悲心以及禅修的方式呢，来寻找这个佛性的这个特征。那当我们在开始慢慢的感受心中有这种很特别的这个平静的时候呢，这是一个非常正常的现象，因为表示您自己本身的佛性呢，已经慢慢的展现出来，因为你本身就具有这个佛性，因此呢，当我们在每天在做这个固定的禅修持的时候呢，就能够慢慢的帮助我们发展出这个佛性。
Another way of sort of coming to understand that you have Buddha nature. I mean, I'm just saying you have Buddha nature, your nature is Buddha nature. I feel like I'm being very repetitive and saying the same thing over and over again. But to really know that you have Buddha nature, if you look at what happens to you when you do the practices. For example, Lama Pema has often taught on the 7 points of mind training and doing Tonglen meditation. He's taught it a lot. He teaches it well. People do this meditation and they get results from it. So when you do the Tonglen meditation, you really put effort into it, and you find that you are you have more and more compassion. You just feeling it develop as you do the practice more, so that then when you go outside, you just automatically feel love or compassion for everyone that you see. When you get to that point, that is a sign of having Buddha nature. Because the qualities within ourselves, like when we're doing mind training, or we're trying to develop our feelings of love, the wish that other beings be happy, our feelings of compassion, the wish that they be free from suffering, these qualities don't have a limit. And by doing these practices, you can come to a point where you have far more compassion than you ever thought possible before. And that's even still limited compared to a Buddha's compassion, by the way. You still have to develop it more. But the point is that we can develop our love and compassion infinitely, because there are infinite numbers of sentient beings. And we can do this just as the Buddha did. And you can see that it's possible when you begin and you start to develop far more compassion than you thought possible by doing the practice. So this is a sign of having Buddha nature.
所以堪布也是再次的强调，以及重复的强调，我们要去认知我们自己的这个佛性，也透过修持呢，我们才能够慢慢的发掘我们自己的佛性。 那我们的住持呢，喇嘛贝玛在每个礼拜二的时候呢，都会给予这个修心七要的这样的一个禅修方式。那很多的学生呢，透过这样的一个修持呢，都得到很好的这个结果。那当我们自己本身就是放更多的时间呢，以及努力呢，在禅修上面，然后我们会慢慢的去发展以及升起更多的这个慈心以及悲心。然后当我们在外面的时候呢，能够帮助一切的这些众生呢，能够让他们得到欢乐以及喜乐。那当我们拥有这样的一个欢乐之心的时候呢，喜悦之心的时候呢，这就是拥有佛性的征兆。那很多人呢，当我们自己身为这个佛教徒呢，当我们发掘自己的这个佛性的时候呢，我们是希望一切的众生都能够离苦得乐。那我们要常常的把我们的慈心以及悲心以及菩提心呢，要无限的这样的一个发展以及升起。当我们拥有这样的一个升起这样的慈心以及悲心的时候呢，我们的佛性呢的光芒呢也会更迅速的展露出来。
So I think that's a good spot to leave it tonight. We will start tomorrow by talking about, we've talked about Buddha nature, so we'll talk about what is Buddha nature to the extent that it's actually possible to speak about that. We'll talk about different analogies of Buddha nature. We will talk about the proof that there's Buddha nature. We've talked a little bit about that already, but I'll go through that a little bit more formally tomorrow, as well as the different types of potential that we all have. So that's a fair amount to speak about tomorrow. I hope I'm not leaving myself too much, but that is the agenda for tomorrow's teachings.
今天就讲到这里。那明天的课程呢，会跟大家解释就是就是佛性的比喻，然后还有佛性的证明，还有不一样种性的类别。
So we will, what shall we do? We shall, maybe we have time for a couple of questions if there are any questions. We will have more time for questions tomorrow. Sometimes it's hard to think of questions. Yes. Duality, the idea of subject and object. That's a very good question. So am I in your world or you in my world? I'm repeating the questions for the folks who are listening over the internet, by the way. So where are we actually at? That's the question. Why don't you translate the question while I think of an answer?
所以刚刚有人问说，我们人在哪里？我们在哪里？那就是说你的世界跟我的世界有什么不同？
So we feel like there is a me that exists entirely independently of you or them, whoever. So there's a me and them, and we feel like they're separate and they're independent. So one aspect of duality is that we think we're separate, independent, we think that we're enduring. We kind of think of ourselves as one thing, and we think of the same of other people, but we think that they're different from us, that they're separated from us, like there's a big distinction between us and them.
所以我们其实每一位都是独立的个体，那就是如果没有你的话，就不会显现出我自己本身的这个本质。那我们都会常常想说，我们都是分开的、分离的，我们都是不一样的。
So there's a me and there's the other, and we think of ourselves as independent when actually we are actually quite linked just by cause and effect. Now, in a sense, we appear to each other as separate. You appear as you, I appear as me, because you're you, I'm me. You're not you, right? So we think of it in this way. But actually, there's the causes and conditions that bring us together actually link us inextricably so that our dependence, me, depends on you. Without you, there's no me. Without me, there's no you. They're one dependent upon the other, so they're interdependent. And also, even if you look at it more, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, everything is sort of like this huge web. So there's not an independent existing you and an independent existing me.
所以呢，就是我们都是需要每一个人都需要就是不一样的个体，那这是非常的重要，因为如果没有你或是没有我的话，我们就没有办法显现出你是你，我是我。那其实你我都是相互连结的。那就像说我们平常生活吃的东西、用的东西，其实都是有互相因缘这样子有互相因果连结的这样的一个条件在。
So on an outer level, on this level, there's no independent existing me, there's no independent existing you. We're actually all interdependent with each other. So that's the outer level. And then on the inner level, in terms of our mind, the only thing that I can know about you is an image that appears in my mind. Well, I see this image. And I also have the feeling of me. That's also an image in my mind. The image of you and the kind of you and then the me that's inside kind of looking out at the image of you, they're both part of the mind. They're both part of that each instant of cognition, each instant that I'm thinking about you, there's that image of you, and there's the image of me kind of knowing each other. It looks like they're separate, but actually they're both part of the same cognition. They're the same. That's duality. We're mistaking it. The only way I know you is through the image of you that appears to me. That is no different than my own subjective sense of a me. So the subject and the object sense are actually two different aspects of the same cognition that we confuse for being separate things, completely separate things. That's the duality that we're speaking about here.
所以对于外在来说呢，这样的一个层次是说，其实我们并不是每个都是独立的个体，其实我们都是相辅相成的。那对于内在的来讲呢，其实我们在思维的时候呢，我会发现说你的这个现象呢，你的这个本人呢，是在我面前。那对于你来说呢，你看到我的时候呢，你也感受我在你的前面。那其实呢，在这种主观以及旁观的这样的意识来说，其实它是应该我们为什么会有这样的感知，就是因为我们自己本身的透过自己的这个偏见或者是自己的感知能力来做这样的一个判断，所以才会有觉得你是你，我是我的这样的概念。
So to go a little bit further with that, in contemporary neuroscience, contemporary thought, Western thought, there's a lot of talk about cognitive images, or another term would be representational theory of consciousness. I'm sorry, Dr. Pearl. You weren't expecting this. So, in the Western way of looking at it, every time we perceive something, there is an image of it that appears, according to neuroscientists, because of the chemical whatever in the energy in the brain, produces an image that we perceive. Buddhism also has a similarly representational idea of consciousness. Oh, I'm very sorry. It's like you're seeing images of things. It's like that when you perceive something, you're not actually seeing the thing. What you're seeing is an image of it in your mind. At the same time as you're seeing an image of that thing in your mind, according to Buddhism, we say that there's another image, the image of me, the image of the looker. Not necessarily me, but a looker and what is looked at. So happening at the same time. Those are both part of every cognition that we have, every consciousness that we have in samsara. So we have this feeling of there's someone looking out at something else, if you're thinking about mind, or that you're hearing something that is out there. In actuality, you cannot find anything that exists out there. You cannot establish, or you cannot prove that anything exists out there independent of a perceiving mind. It cannot be separate. It cannot exist separately. They have to happen at the same time. If they happen at the same time, then they must be the same. If you sometimes had the known aspect and sometimes had the knower, then sometimes one and sometimes the other without each other, then you could say that they're separate. But because they must appear at the same time, they have to be the same. Is that clear?
I'll try.
You'll try, okay.
所以呢，在扩展刚刚所说的，就是在当代的这个西方的他们的发现来说呢，其实就是有一种像这种思维的理论。那大部分的有一些科学家来说，他们就是因为一些化学的一些变化，透过我们的大脑，然后呢能看到就是我们前方的这些影像等等。那对于佛教的这个经典来说呢，也有这样子的一个说法。那一切呢就是唯心造，就是说我们觉得前面有这样的一个东西，所以在你的面前有这个实体真实的东西存在。那对于我们来说呢，如果我们只要是因为我们是透过我们自己的意识以及感知来感受你看到的东西，或者是你闻到或你碰触到的东西，你感觉东西是在这个前面，但是其实很多的东西其实并不是在你的面前，很多东西是可能由不一样的这些粒子或者是物质合而成的。但是如果我们真正的把它用观修的方式去拆解的话，其实在你的面前的这些东西呢，其实它是空性的，它是没有的。但是你认为在你的面前是有的东西，那你觉得那就是有的。那你觉得前面这个东西其实是没有的，透过观修的方式，那它就是空性的。
So let's make this clear simply, right? Because this is a kind of, I was just speaking on a kind of philosophical level, to make it really simple. We all see this bouquet of flowers, right? Now, what science tells us is that what we're seeing is light is coming through the windows, and from the lights up, it hits this, and it bounces in our eyes, and then we see an image in our mind, right?
我们再讲一个简单的例子，然后堪布手上呢有拿一盆花。那对于科学家来讲，外面的这个窗户的灯照射在这个花上面，那透过我们的眼睛眼视呢，我们就在我们的心中就出现花朵的这样的一个形象出现。
So we are not seeing the flowers. We are seeing light that hits the flowers and then reflects to our eyeballs, right? So we're not seeing the flowers, we're seeing the light that comes, right?
所以呢，我们看到的其实不是花，我们看到的是从窗外面的那个灯光或者这个光呢照射在这个物质上面，所以我们看出来的东西其实它不是花。
Is that clear? Is that much clearer? So that's the image in our mind. We call that, in philosophical speak, we'd call that a cognitive image.
所以呢，我们看到的影像是由我们心中所展现出来的这个影像。
Then we also have the sense that I am looking at the flowers. There's a sense of someone looking. That is what we would call the subjective image.
所以我们透过我们的眼睛去看这个花，那我们看到的这个影像呢是非常的主观。
So when you are looking at the flower, you are having a consciousness, a visual consciousness, an eye consciousness of the flower. That's one consciousness. But it seems like it has two parts, me and the flower.
所以我们在看花的时候呢，是透过眼视去看这个花。那其实可以分回两个部分，第一个是我，然后第二个是花。
Now, are there flowers here? There are flowers here, right? How do we know there are flowers? Because we see them. It's easy, right? If you couldn't see the flowers, you'd say, oh, maybe there are flowers, maybe there aren't. Are there flowers here? You don't know. There are definitely flowers right here. And we know because we see them.
那我们要知道它如果是花呢，那其实是我们可以看，是透过我们的眼睛去看，所以我们知道它是花。
So it's because we know them. But what we know that we think is actually not the flower. It's the image that we see. It's not the flower. It's the image caused by light that reflects off the flower. So we're not seeing the flower, but we think we do. And we say, therefore, there is a flower here.
所以我们知道这其实不是花，这是由外面的光照射进来的影像，然后反映在我们的心中。
So that's the basic duality. That's what we mean by dualism. And I think you, Reggie, had a question. Mm-hmm.
And when you describe a flower, when I say flower, in my impression, without telling you the color, without describing it, you may think it's red. She may think it's yellow.
Mm-hmm.
So, but something is telling me flower. Where's that you know, is the mind is experiencing that because we build them, you know, from what we see and mind. But when you say Buddha nature is being empty, it's permanent. It's like gold. The mind is always changing.
Yes, this is the difficult part about Buddha nature.
The Buddha nature should not change. It's always permanent.
Mm.
Whereas our mind is always subjected to experience. But in real fact, the experience and non-experience is in Buddha nature. It doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. So the difficulty, yes, this is a very difficult question. So to paraphrase it for everyone listening over the internet, basically when we speak about this, then it seems kind of strange. Because when you say flower, then you have different ideas about what flowers are. They may seem differently. You say flower, some people might think of a red flower or a green flower, different types of flowers. And yet this idea of what a flower is constantly changing. It's always different. And actually also, even whenever you see it, it's always changing because sometimes you can move the flower around or the wind moves the flower or you look in a different way and the image of the flower in your mind changes. So it's always changing. But Buddha nature doesn't change. So it's like, how can this idea fit with the Buddha nature, which is constant? And the questioner said, permanent. But you have these changing ideas of flowers. How do these square? It seems like Buddha nature should be the nature of this, but how can it be?
再下来就是刚刚有位师兄的问题是，我们自己的心跟这个佛性呢，其实是不一样的。那我们自己本身这个心呢，就是在看这个花的时候呢，可能有时候会看到不一样的颜色、不一样的形状等等，它是一直持续的在改变。那对于佛性来讲呢，它是不变的，它的本质是不变的，然后它是永恒的。
So this is actually one of the really difficult points about Buddha nature. It's because you have the confusion of the world, the appearances of the world that are always changing, and then you have Buddha nature that is unchanging, unconditioned, unaffected by anything else. We don't say it's permanent because it's hard to identify anything that is Buddha nature. You can't say it's permanent. If you could say something was permanent, you'd have to say, this is what it is. But you can't really say what Buddha nature is, so you can't say it's permanent. But it's unconditioned, it's nothing changing. And yet we have this confusion that keeps happening.
在这个混乱的这个世界当中呢，其实很多事情是在改变的。然后对于佛性来说呢，我们也不能说它是永恒的，然后它也不是一直持续的这个不变的。
So when we perceive things, this dualism is also what we would call great ignorance. It's that basic ignorance of mistaking things and not seeing what they are, thinking that they exist, really, that there is a real flower that's separate from me, thinking that it's there. And if instead of looking outward at those experiences, instead we can let that become aware of the nature of our mind as it is. That nature of our mind as it is no different than Buddha nature. But we don't see it because we're so busy looking out at flowers and thinking that there's a me who's looking out. So when you can drop the idea of there being a subject, me, and an object, the flower or whatever else, and just rest in the mind as it is, and then look and truly see it as it is, then you can experience the Buddha nature. And at first you have short experiences, and then they will get longer and longer if you have the right guidance on the path. And so this is the basic thing. It's the nature of the mind, as it says in the Vajradhara lineage prayer. The nature of thoughts, the essence of thought is Dharmakaya, as it's taught. So it's basically saying that with every thought we have, even though it's confused the way it appears to us, if we were actually to truly see it for how it is, if we were to overcome our ignorance by becoming aware of its nature, then we would be able to rest within the Buddha nature.
由于是我们自己本身的这个无知，然后我们没有办法去真实的看到自己的本身的这个佛性。那我们凡夫俗子呢，常常是在这个世界当中呢，常常是往外看，没有真正的去发掘，或是往自己的内心去自修何谓这个佛性。那当我们在做观修的时候呢，如果我们能够让自己的心能够定下来，那就能够慢慢的更深入的去发展自己的这个佛性。那在大手印的祈请文当中呢，也有讲到这个法身即是佛性的这样的一个句子。那只要透过我们自己的长时修的这个观修呢，就能够慢慢的去证得自己的这个佛性。
So that all takes time. And you have to start with the basic steps.
这需要时间。
Yeah, takes time. You have to start with all the basic steps and follow them one at a time. When we're talking about looking at the nature of mind, it's not as easy as it sounds.
所以在去发掘自己的佛性的时候呢，需要强烈的这个基础，然后一步一步的去让自己能够证得这个佛性。
So I think maybe that's enough for today. I tried to keep it light until we got to the questions.
Is that what senior monks spend their time doing in monasteries? Meditate on these things? What do those guys do?
Yes. Is that like what senior monks and nuns, by the way, do in monasteries and nunneries? Yes. Quite a number of monks and nuns will go through years and years of study, contemplating and thinking about these, debating and writing and becoming, really very learned about it. Their monks will spend years meditating, like Lodha Nyima Rinpoche, one of the 4 main lamas of Trungpa Monastery in Tibet, went through studied. He went to 3-year retreat. He worked rebuilding the Trungpa Monastery in Tibet. He built it a second time after the earthquake, and then he went off to retreat for 4 years. He came back to the monastery, and then he went back off to retreat for another year. So yeah, this is what we do. Unless we're talking about food.
OK，所以刚刚有人发问说，是不是大部分的比较年长的、资深的这些出家人都是在做这个观修自己的这个佛性？是没错。那很多的堪布有讲，有一位仁波切或是喇嘛呢，他在寸古寺呢，他花了3年的闭关时间闭关，然后呢之后那个在西藏的时候，由于地震，然后他又帮忙修建这个寺院。那之后呢，他又去4年的闭关，那之后呢，又在帮忙这个寺院，然后最后又去闭关，这样反反复复的修持，然后为了这个目的是为了证得自己的这个佛性。
So we have one very important thing to do now, which is to dedicate the merit. And this is actually extremely important.
接下来
Yeah, go ahead.
接下来呢，我们要做最后的回向，这是非常重要的。
And the reason it's so important is that if we just get up and go, we're going to forget everything. It won't. But if you think to yourself, I've done something good, you appreciate it, and then you think, may this not just be good for me, but may it be good for all sentient beings, then on a purely psychological level, you can feel like it sinks in a little bit more. And it's said in the scriptures that if you dedicate the merit to all sentient beings, then once you've done that, no matter what you do later, you can't do anything that would remove or destroy that merit. So it's a really very important part of every activity we do. So today we'll just do a very brief one because of time, but it's important that you really think carefully while we do it.
我们不应该就是聆听完佛法之后呢就离开，那我们要把我们今天所聆听的这个教法呢，能够回向给一切如母有情众生，希望他们能够离苦得乐。那其实呢，当我们在做这个回向的时候呢，其实是对我们以及对一切众生是非常有利益的。那就是当我们做完回向之后呢，可能在路上或者怎么样，我们升起一个嗔心的时候，我们不会因为这个嗔心，然后毁坏了我们刚刚所累积的这些功德。因此呢，回向这个部分是非常重要的一门功课。
So please think to yourselves that by all of the good that we have done by teaching and listening to the Dharma, that we and all other sentient beings can practice the path, reveal our Buddha nature, and reach the ultimate state of Buddhahood, and that until such time as that we do, that we never experience any of the sufferings of samsara, no plague, famine, war, or other suffering.
所以呢，当我们在做回向的时候，我们要观想我们这些一切的善业能够回向给一切的如母有情众生，也希望他们也能够证得这个佛性，也能够证得佛果。希望一切的众生能够没有任何的痛苦，然后世界也没有任何的战争。
So we will recite the dedication on page 217.
请翻开217页做回向。
It's the very last one. Sanam de tam jesi bani tomne nye bedranam pam chete Gegana chi bala chubai Sibe zole drogunyor drosho. Thank you. 谢谢你们。